The Hale residence stood at the edge of an Austin suburb, surrounded by a perfectly manicured lawn and a white picket fence, the picture of the American dream. Everything about the house was flawless: crystal vases, lavender-scented candles, expensive magazines placed with surgical precision on the coffee table, as if no one ever dared to read them. A perfect facade, hiding something far more complicated. Jackson Hale, a successful, 43-year-old attorney, came home later than usual. He turned the key in the lock slowly, trying not to make a sound. Lately, he found himself staying longer at the office. Not because of work, just because it was easier than going home. Ashley, his wife, was sitting in the living room with her usual glass of white wine and that smile, the one that had started to feel too rehearsed. She looked like a woman off the cover of a magazine, slim, polished, with perfect hair. But behind the gloss, Jackson had started to see the emptiness. "Hi, honey," she said in her usual tone. "Working late again?" "Yeah, swamped," he replied without meeting her eyes. It was an evening like thousands of others. But something had changed. Today, he knew. He used to dismiss the rumors. Colleagues whispered, friends hinted, but he brushed it off. She would never, he'd tell himself, until he saw the messages. At first, he didn't believe them. Then he checked the financial records. Private meetings, phone calls. It all lined up. Ashley had been cheating on him. Not once. Not with one man. For years. He looked at her, and there was no rage. Only a cold, rational calm. He wasn't going to scream. He was a lawyer, and lawyers know how to wait. That night, his plan began. 5 steps. Quiet. Legally perfect. And each one would look like coincidence. Ashley wouldn't know she'd lost until there was nothing left. On Saturday morning, Jackson woke before Ashley. He lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling like a man alone in an empty movie theater. Long after the credits had rolled, unable to leave his seat. Her breathing was soft, steady. Beside him lay the woman who had shattered everything he built, blissfully unaware. In the kitchen, he brewed a strong coffee and sat down at his laptop. His fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard, unlocking a folder he had created 2 weeks ago. Its title, Plan A. He was never one for dramatic names. Inside were screenshots of Ashley's messages with 3 different men. One of them, Josh Pearson, was his law firm partner. Jackson had also saved bank statements showing payments for apartment rentals, luxury dinners, plane tickets to Vegas, all paid from their joint account. He even had video. Ashley leaving a hotel room with Josh, recorded by a private investigator he had hired a month earlier. He reviewed the report. Surveillance. 14 days. Confirmed infidelity. Multiple incidents. His heart didn't race. Everything was under control. He closed the laptop, placed it carefully in his leather briefcase, and sat back on the kitchen stool. The silence in the house felt surgical, clean, cold. Ashley came down 15 minutes later in her silk robe, smiling as if the world hadn't changed. She kissed his cheek, grabbed a water glass, and poured herself some orange juice. "You're quiet today," she said, sipping. "Everything okay?" He turned to her, smiled. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about work." She noticed nothing. Her version of reality remained intact. His reality had just begun. Jackson no longer lived in illusion. He knew. She just didn't know that he knew. For the next 2 weeks, Jackson behaved impeccably. He was even more affectionate than usual, brought home her favorite coffee, arranged candlelit dinners, offered compliments he once gave out of obligation. Ashley bloomed. She believed the tension between them had passed. Maybe she sensed something, but not that he knew. Every step she took was now under his control. Her phone had been cloned, with the help of a specialist. Jackson received her messages in real time. He knew where she went, who she met, what she planned. Ashley continued to play her part, unaware that the stage was no longer hers. At work, Jackson made his first move. He quietly pushed Josh away from key cases, citing a potential conflict of interest and a routine internal audit. No one suspected a thing. He handled it politely, professionally, legally. As always, on the evenings when Ashley claimed to be going to yoga, he sat in front of his laptop, GPS clearly showing she was at a hotel. He wasn't angry. He was methodical. Each day, he took a step. Each day, invisible, but inevitable. He wasn't just going to punish her. He was going to erase her life from the ground up. Jackson knew, to destroy someone completely, you must first make them dependent. He started small. He began telling Ashley she didn't need to work. You're tired. You deserve a break. Why put yourself through the stress? She smiled, flattered by his concern. A week later, she resigned from the marketing firm where she had worked for 7 years. Then he gave her a new car, luxurious, just as she had dreamed. But it was in his name. Everything was in his name. The new bank account, insurance, even the jewelry he gave her for their relationship anniversary was purchased through his company. He opened a joint account where her personal funds were now under his quiet control. Ashley didn't notice. She felt like she was falling in love with him all over again. He was so attentive, generous, thoughtful. He started talking about the future, a new house, moving to Florida, maybe even a child. Ashley listened with a wide smile. For a brief moment, her heart even ached. Maybe he was the man she had betrayed, and yet he still loved her. She didn't realize it was all part of the plan. He was building the illusion of perfect love, while quietly stripping her of independence. He knew, when the day came and the mask was ripped away, she would have nowhere to go. By March, Jackson had begun weaving his trap. He knew, the key was precision. One mistake, and it all fell apart. Lawyers, like murderers, needed airtight alibis. He started with consultations. Discreetly, never using corporate emails. He hired 2 independent legal specialists, one in tax law, the other in family law, under a false name, through a proxy contact. All documents were sent to a mailbox registered under the name of a deceased relative. He moved assets. First, he sold a second property, his parents' old condo, clearing nearly $400,000. The money vanished. But in truth, it funded an offshore trust in Delaware. Then, he transferred firm shares to a temporary trustee. Everything legal, everything clean. Ashley continued to live like she was in a fairy tale. He even took her on a trip to Colorado, skiing, wine, a luxury hotel. She laughed, took selfies, posted, best weekend of the winter. He smiled beside her. But every dinner, every toast, was a screen for his next move. He began preparing divorce papers. Quietly. At the same time, he assembled evidence for an investigation into Josh, data leaks, conflict of interest, inappropriate conduct within the firm. It would all look like Jackson was protecting the integrity of the company. The web was tightening. One wrong move, and she might sense it. But he knew. She liked to believe she was in control. She was just a pawn. Jackson knew. The most devastating blows come from those closest. That's why the next step was Josh Pearson, lover, friend, business partner. The perfect weapon. Jackson invited him to a bar. It felt casual, 2 old friends meeting after hours. Josh, completely unaware, ordered bourbon and started talking about a minor deal. Jackson nodded, listened, then leaned in and said quietly, I know about Ashley. Josh turned pale. His eyes froze, his hand trembled. He started to speak, but Jackson raised his hand. I'm not angry. I just want to use this situation for both our benefit. He sounded convincing. Said he wanted to protect the firm's reputation, that he didn't want a scandal. He offered Josh would step down from his partnership role but receive a generous golden parachute payout. In return, he would sign a non-disclosure agreement, admit ethical misconduct, and take the fall for an internal information leak. Cornered, Josh agreed. He didn't know Jackson had already sent anonymous evidence to the board, and that if he didn't sign, he'd face public disgrace and possibly criminal charges. Ashley was now alone. She didn't know Josh wouldn't be answering her calls, that he had already moved to Arizona, that by next week, his name would vanish from the firm's website. Jackson erased her shield in a single move, and used her own betrayal to do it. Ashley woke up early. Something was wrong, intangible, unsettling. Her phone was silent. Josh hadn't responded in 3 days. Messages unread. His Instagram account? Gone. And his name had disappeared from the firm's website. Just gone. She tried calling again. No answer. Her heart started to race. A cold feeling settled in her stomach, the kind that comes before a storm. When the sky is still clear, but the air has changed. When Jackson returned from work, she brought it up. Have you heard anything about Josh? He's just disappeared. He set down his briefcase, took off his jacket, walked to the bar, and poured himself a whiskey. He left, he said calmly. We had some differences. He made the right decision to step away from the firm. Ashley froze. Her voice dropped. Did you know we were involved. He looked at her. Long calm. I knew. She said nothing. Not a sound. Just slowly sank into the chair. Why didn't you say anything? He took a sip and replied. Because this isn't over. That night, for the first time, she felt the ground shift beneath her. For the first time, she realized he knew something. Something big. And that he was no longer the Jackson she once knew. A week later, everything changed. Jackson no longer hid his distance. He came home later, spoke to Ashley briefly, coldly, to the point. No dinners, no touches. It was as if someone had shut off the warmth in a house that used to glow. One morning, she discovered she was locked out of their joint account. Login error. She called the bank, after a pause. The agent told her she was no longer a co-owner of the account. This must be a mistake, she shouted. All paperwork is in order, ma'am, the voice on the phone replied. The account was restructured under power of attorney, signed by both parties earlier. Her credit card stopped working too. Emails poured in, unpaid auto insurance, lapsed coverage. She was sure it had all been paid. Things were crumbling, not loudly, but precisely. When she returned home, he was waiting with a folder in his hands. It's all here, he said. Divorce papers. You can hire a lawyer. Or sign now. Jackson. Her voice trembled. You planned this. For years, he said. But you started it first. He placed the folder on the table, turned, and walked out of the room. Ashley was left alone, in a house where everything belonged to him. The furniture, the electronics, even the bedsheets. He didn't shout. He didn't seek loud revenge. He simply switched her off, like a light. 2 days later, Ashley packed her things. She tried to argue, to plead, even threaten. But Jackson didn't react. He didn't yell, didn't beg. He simply reminded her, the house is in my name. You don't live here anymore. Her credit cards, frozen. Phone, temporarily active on a prepaid plan. The car he had gifted, repossessed. It was in his name, and he had revoked the authorization. She was left with one suitcase and a bank account showing exactly $82. Friends? Most vanished. Some claimed to be busy. Others simply went silent. Everyone knew. Jackson had initiated legal proceedings. And everyone knew who paid the top lawyers in town. Ashley spent nights first on a coworker's couch, then in a motel on the edge of town. Calls to Josh. No answer. He had vanished, like his promises. A week later, she applied for assistance. At the employment office, she heard something that shattered her. There's nothing that sets you apart. You don't have any current skills that qualify you. But I have experience. Your experience is outdated. The world moves on. Jackson didn't just get revenge. He erased her from the map. Not with screams, but with silence. Not with a blow, but with precision. One evening, a month into the divorce proceedings, Jackson invited Ashley to a cafe, a neutral place, no cameras, no witnesses. She came, nervous, with hope and fear. He looked her in the eyes and said, You thought this was just a game? That I didn't know about your years of lies? She was silent. I knew everything, he continued. All the affairs, all the betrayals. Every secret phone call, every hidden account. He pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. Here are the proofs. I've sent them to your employer, your lawyer, everyone involved in your perfect image. Why? She whispered. Because the truth is the final move. And I want you to start over. Without lies. Without masks. He stood and left, leaving her alone with the weight. Ashley realized she had lost. But she also understood. This game had changed them both forever. After that meeting, Ashley felt her life shatter completely. Job lost, friends vanished, reputation in ruins. She was forced to move into a small rental on the city's outskirts, a place without light or hope. But in that darkness, she began to see herself clearly. No masks, no illusions. She sought therapy, enrolled in skills courses, trying desperately to regain control. Jackson, meanwhile, finalized the divorce, took all the assets, and kept his promise, not to interfere if she chose to start anew honestly. He erased everything from his life that tied him to the past. They both changed, but that was their fate, to learn how to breathe again. Months passed. Ashley changed beyond recognition. The glamorous parties and bright smiles were gone. She stopped making excuses and started building a new life from scratch. Her first step was a course in digital marketing, a field where she could work remotely and where fresh ideas mattered more than past connections. At first, Progress was slow, filled with doubts and fears. But gradually she gained momentum. The most important part was inner acceptance, admitting her mistakes and letting go of resentment toward Jackson. Her therapist often said, "True strength is the ability to move forward no matter what." Jackson wasn't standing still either. He focused on his work and personal growth, abandoning old ambitions in favor of peace of mind. His new goal was to rebuild lost trust in himself. They walked separate paths, but now each understood the value of honesty with themselves and others. Spring brought changes. Ashley landed her first remote job, a small content creation project for a startup, far from her previous status, but every small achievement boosted her confidence. New people entered her life, colleagues and friends, who didn't know her past and didn't judge. Among them was Lana, who became a mentor and support in the toughest times. Jackson, meanwhile, started his own consulting firm. He learned to speak about his feelings and stopped hiding his vulnerabilities. His family relationships gradually healed, and peace settled in his soul. One day, they accidentally met at a city modern art exhibition. Their eyes met, not with blame or pain, but with respect. In that silence lay understanding. They had both walked through fire and emerged stronger. The future remained uncertain, but now it promised a new beginning, honest and free. Ashley found herself thinking more often about what freedom truly meant. Freedom was not just the absence of chains, but the responsibility for every decision made. She understood that returning to her old life was impossible, and that no longer frightened her. At work, she achieved her first successes. Her projects were recognized, and the startup's leaders offered her a permanent collaboration. Small victory after small victory. Now she was writing her own story. Jackson watched her progress from afar and felt peace. He no longer hungered for revenge or control. He now valued the fact that everyone deserves a second chance. One evening, they exchanged a brief message. "Thanks for the lessons. You too. No blame. No demands. Just two souls who had walked through pain and found their way back to themselves." Freedom of choice, the most precious gift. Years passed. Ashley and Jackson were no longer together, but each found happiness in their own way. She built a career grounded in honesty and perseverance. He created a life free from bitterness and grudges. Their past remained a lesson, not a punishment. They understood that true strength lies in the ability to forgive, let go, and move forward. The story ended not with revenge or defeat, but with rebirth. The rebirth of themselves, their freedom, and the right to a new life. And that was their real revenge, the American way, but with a human face.